Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ Namassāmi. So something that's been coming up for me as a reflection and a theme for contemplation in my own practice this last little while is just reflecting on and refining or trying to refine the perspective on the middle way, and just that how much it just comes up over and over and over again. The sense of this middleness of this middle way that the Buddha taught, and how fine a balance it is, and of course how broad a perspective it really is. I mean, it's just this simple perspective or reflection, but then you start realizing that it applies to absolutely everything in terms of our conduct and our relation, the way we relate to other people, how we speak, how we act, how we apply the mind to mindfulness and just general awareness, but then also find that refining of our awareness and settling the mind in meditation and that composing of the mind, and then all of the aspects of view and discernment, aspects of wisdom. It all is relying on this middleness of the middle way, this balance of different faculties and balance of how we hold those perspectives. So just to recognize how that plays itself out, and how much we have to pay attention to it. Just on a kind of a simple way of how Ajahn Chah describing his own teaching, and after being a Western disciple expressing their frustration at Ajahn Chah's teaching, and how sometimes he taught one way, sometimes he taught another, and there didn't seem to be a consistency, and Ajahn Chah just sort of saying, well, all I do is, pay attention to what people are doing, how they're practicing, and when I see them going off in some extreme or doing something, falling off to the wayside on the path on the left hand side, all I do is say, go right, go right. But then if I see people, going off onto getting lost somewhere off to the right, and they're saying, go left, go left, go left, and it sounds so kind of mundane or ordinary, but what it is really, again, trying to find that middle way, and sometimes it's helpful to have teachings and teachers for us to hear and reflect on, and to have guidance from. But we ourselves really have to pay attention to our own practice, the results of the practice, the experience in the practice, and really see for ourselves. Is there a balance there? Is there a middleness of this middle way manifesting for us? And it isn't just some kind of bland, middling compromise that constitutes this middle way, but it's more of when something is really just right, just appropriate. And of course, they as in the whole purpose of how the Buddha structured his teaching was for as he said himself, I teach only two things, suffering and cessation of suffering. So that learning how to reflect from that perspective of dukkha, it doesn't. We don't need to be I just say miserable and completely depressed or something, and for it to be suffering. But it's because even the experience of say happiness and well-being can be suffering. One is and there's so many ways that even that we can suffer over that. Just the agitation that can come from that anxiety of knowing that it's going to end, or having to be separated from the pleasant, having to be separated from the things that we have gained that we really like, we appreciate, or it doesn't quite live up to one's expectation, where even if one experiences some happiness and well-being or peacefulness in the meditation, and then and you can't help but have the thought, well, I thought it would be better than that, and I thought there was more to it than this and this. So then we're that perpetual dissatisfaction that plays such just plagues the mind, plagues the heart. So that, but as we practice and reflect, just being able to pay attention to, well, what is the, because nothing, I say part of the middleness of the middle way is the understanding of how everything is dependent on causes and conditions. Uh, Everything arises dependent on certain conditions, and certain things need to be in place. So certainly the whether it's for the arising of dukkha or for the cessation of dukkha, and to be willing to be reflecting, turning one's attention to those causal processes, rather than trying to or fixate, rather than fixating on one or the other, and trying to hold it in the sense of, because some things are like just the cause of even the experience of dukkha, the cause of dukkha, which they have different desire systems, and then you know, putting a value judgment on it of, oh, isn't this awful, isn't this terrible, why am I doing this again? It's just it's another set of causes and conditions that one has to understand, has to penetrate, has to see clearly how it works, so that it can be transformed, and everything can be transformed because everything is in a state of change, of certain motion is there. Even when the mind becomes really, really still and quiet, there's still a certain movement there, because everything is built on conditions. And that's not a fault or a flaw of it per se. It's just the way it is. The problem is when we have that, I say, react to things out of that with the, say, the causes of suffering, causes of dukkha. Say, there's different types of desire, that kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. That desire for sensual gratification, for the desire for being, for becoming, for trying to fix things, desire for non-being, non-becoming, not wanting, shouldn't be this way. To the mind swinging with those sense of either, and it's kind of like indulgence or denial. Is the broad brush, seeing what the mind moves with, seeing what the mind, how it trips itself up, and it's swinging in one extreme or to another, and again, doesn't need to be extreme. Language is always hard to pin down, but that sense of, because even that movement toward, they say, like indulgence, and say, yeah, I want that, it should be this way, I try to keep it, and even when it's, we logically justify, say, the trying to hold on to a peaceful state of mind, that is quite, we're encouraged to try to bring stability to these peaceful states of mind in our meditation practice, and that is appropriate. But then those agendas and biases and habits of self and identification creep in, and then it becomes, there's a certain indulgence there where one is trying to force it, hold on to it too tightly, and it becomes problematic. And that sort of that sense of denial, not wanting, shouldn't be that way. And of course, we're encouraged to to let go, to free the mind from its unskillful habits and tendencies. But that sense of this middleness of the middle way, where's that balance so that there isn't a place of suffering? So this encouraging ourselves to explore that and reflect, and not just look at things on the surface, or look at things from a logical, rational, black and white, should be this or shouldn't be that, but more the subtle ways that the path unfolds, and the subtle ways that the mind complicates, learning how to investigate and explore. And of course, that requires mindfulness, clear comprehension, that sense of awareness that is willing to know clearly without just leaping in with the first impulse or bias that comes up in the mind. And the same with that sense of say that cessation of suffering. The Buddha, in his the very first discourse, the Buddha said that the cessation of suffering is from that cessation of the various forms of desire systems that plague us, and then saying how do we we deal with that? How do we work with that? And that's just the different ways or descriptions of what the Buddha points out, what we do in order to let go of desire, to bring desire to a place of cessation. And that's in the Pali, there's a chako patinisako mutti analayo. And what do those mean? What's the feeling tone, and the approach to that? So that the chaka, is like a both a giving but giving up, a giving up of something. But there's also a certain generosity, because sometimes we can give up with aversion, or give up with like a pushing away. But chaka is also, there's a generosity of heart that's there, a generosity of spirit, where we're willing to give up something because it's for our own benefit and the benefit of others, the more we're willing to give up the things that are obstructive and difficult, and not because we're just pushing it away with aversion, but really willing to see clearly and with wisdom and discernment, that needs to be given up. And sometimes that we keep getting frustrated or we see the ways that we create suffering for ourselves over and over again. And if we build a sense of self around it, build a sense of identity around it, then it's hard to really give up, because there's an aversion that's there, that sort of, it's like a thread that when it's given up, it keeps coming back to us. But that sense of, there's a certain giving up, there's a generosity of heart that's willing to really, really give it up, really put it down, really let go of it. And that I think of what's come to mind as a description or an image, and it's something that I came across years and years ago from, and I can't remember which book it is, Thomas Hardy, where the protagonist having an attachment to a person, a woman, and sort of the love of his life, and it was always difficult in front of anybody. He said it was like he wasn't tied to that with some kind of chains that were impossible to break, but more like a delicate golden thread that it pained him to break. And it's really beautiful, because that's how we tend to be. A lot of the attachments that really go deep and really go that we're willing to give up the coarser ones, the ones that are that really pain us. But it's those more subtle attachments that we really have to investigate, really understand, really that it pains us to break. It's beautiful and delicate in its perception, but of course the reality is it keeps bringing us back to disappointment and frustration. So that sense of investigation and then that giving up charcoal, and that giving up with a generosity of heart. Patinisago is a relinquishment. That sense of really, and that sense of really relinquishing, seeing very clearly through. Again, this is this middleness of the middle way, this balanced perspective that isn't getting entangled, and then it's able to relinquish. We can really give up, we can really put it down, we can really let it go. And that mutti is like release. It's part of the, like the word vimutti is like freedom. And mutti is the basis of that freedom is that release, where there's when we finally do let go of something, there's just a release from this and moving into a kind of a space and spaciousness and light. Because oftentimes we don't even know that we've boxed ourselves into a tiny little corner that's kind of dark and miserable. That's our life. This is what it is. But it isn't until we really release the attachments and biases and clinging that we have, we realize, whoa, there's a lot more available here, a lot more space, a lot more light, and to be engaging in. And analio in the last one is sort of freedom from desire, freedom from attachment, kind of a non-clinging, non-stickiness where the mind doesn't stick to things. And again, that's a sense of this middleness of the middle way, where one can see things clear. You can see things that, we like or we dislike or we approve or disapprove. Yeah, we see, but the mind, the heart doesn't stick to it, doesn't attach to it, doesn't cling on to it and entangle itself. It's a non-entangled quality. And it's completely clear, completely imbued with wisdom and discernment, but it's not entangled, it's not sticking. So that cessation of, and it's say dukkha nirodha in cessation of dukkha, but it's also, I think it's important to even be reflecting on how we hold and define or assume what say cessation of dukkha is, cessation of suffering, because the on a superficial level and the habitual way of assuming it is that if it's a cessation, then it means there's something there, there's some suffering there, and I've got to bring it to an end. I've got to make it cease. It should be something that was there and then it's not. And then it would be a cessation of suffering. But the word nirodha is many layered, and so that oftentimes it's described and pointed to as like a non-arising, so that being able to see things so clearly and have that so firmly rooted in truth, or that middleness of the middle way is so balanced that there is a non-arise. There's just dukkha does not arise. There is a non-arising of dukkha. It doesn't mean there's nothing happening. one is seeing things very clearly, but there isn't a movement towards that discontent, dissatisfaction, stress. And that was something that, say, like living with Ajahn and seeing him in all sorts of different situations and dealing with uh, the conditions around him and different people and just seeing this non-arising. Nothing was problematic. Nothing was so difficult that it was was a problem. There wasn't anything that was intimidating or problematic. So that since that is a possibility, and of course that's the possibility that the Buddha points out to us, gives us the tools to experience for ourselves. And we start to see this more and more clear as we put the teachings into practice, investigate it, and of course we do start to. This is where this middleness of the middle way. We do start to experience the mind does become a bit more peaceful. It does become a bit more settled. It does become a bit more clear. There's much more ease and well-being, and that's we see that for ourselves. And then as we continue to reflect and investigate and say, oh wow, yeah, even in that, there's this, the balance sometimes is not quite there. And we continue to let go. We continue to relinquish and release. And so again, thinking of Ajahn and just the simple way, and everybody's heard it, but it's so, I think, direct and clear. As it, you let go a little, you get a little peace. You let go a lot, you get a lot of peace. You let go completely, you get complete peace. Quite simple, but it's really true. It's very apt to offer that for reflection this evening.